Welcome to this new tutorial made by Motion Cafe. Let's talk about traditional animation with Adobe Animate CC, previously called Adobe Flash, to use in addition with After Effects to realize a fluid animation composition. So you don't need to have drawer talents to make this tutorial. And we're going to see together some processes that allow you to have fairly fluid movements precisely. I'd like to thank Edward Mikolov, who motivated me to go on this subject. Now, he recently made a tutorial, and I encourage you to see his video. The link's in the description. Special thank you to our partner, AE Juice. They've translated this video into English for you. Check out their Liquid Elements pack, over 1,000 frame-by-frame animations for your projects. It comes with a handy Pack Manager plugin. Basically, it's a huge asset library on demand. Press a shortcut to open the plugin, drag and drop, and you're done. This is one of those investments that'll last you a lifetime. The links are in the description. All links are affiliated, so if you purchase something from AE Juice, we'll get a commission. It helps us to produce more tutorials and sustain our community. Thank you for supporting Motion Cafe. We'll immediately start on After Effects, then we'll see the tools I'm using. Now, the idea is that this is reachable for everyone, so we're going to realize a dribble shot. So here you are on my dribble page, and the idea is to make this render, which is going to be on an 800 by 600 pixel resolution. Now, first, we start by this principle. I make a new composition. And because it's going to be a traditional animation frame per frame, we're going to start on 12. Because we're going to make frame per frame to 25 or 30 is going to be too long, and the render is not great. So voila! We take a background, and we take 2 minutes on After to prepare our composition. We already know where we go and what we'll do. So the first step is to make a ball in the middle. Don't ask me why the ball's in the middle, it's just to have fun. So we make this little ball with a form layer. Double-click, it's in the composition. And I adjust its size to 200 by 200 pixels. When I have this, the idea is to anticipate with the pen. I'll create and try to imagine the direction of the little children of this ball. There will be two, so we're going to name it A and B. It won't be complicated. Here, I'm spending time to visualize their direction, to make sure it doesn't touch. To make sure it takes aesthetic curves and direction, and that it's well balanced in the composition. Take the time on it. It's really important that you allow it in Animate to be able to manage the velocities. As you can see, I'm creating two little spirals to place secondary animation. These are the main lines I put here. The idea is when we think we found a good render, we generate an image and we go to Animate. Here we are on Animate. Now, it's not complicated to open and start a new project. In our case, we'll click on Action Script. We won't work for web. This is the most standard that will be chosen. So here, I'm on the classic interface, and you can search other kind of interfaces. But we're going to go on classic, so we'll find the toolbars to the left. The timeline is at the top, which is called Here Scenario, and the compositions, which is called Sequence, at the bottom. Immediately, we'll have the sizes to the right. Here, I can change the right resolution of the composition to 800 by 600. I can adjust the window. At the top, we'll be able to add keyframes, and all the frames shown here on cases. We have on Layer by default that have just arrived. This layer, we'll see one frame that has just arrived. This frame, I can add new frames with keyboard shortcuts. If I press on F7, I'll add a new frame. We'll see there are little circles which indicate if there's data or not. Currently, there's nothing. I can take the brush here or the pen tool. Shortcut B, and here I have my brush. If I'm starting to draw, we'll see that our frame is filled. Now, this is going to be different from our other previous keyframes. So we'll first have a shortcut F7, which allows us to create new keyframes automatically. If we go back to the keyframe we just created here and want to extend its duration, press F5, and you'll see I'm adding a duration every time I press it. It's going to the last X frame. Now, we'll be able to go see all the shortcuts here, but I want to show you F7 and F5, which allows you to create new keyframes. The idea isn't to walk around with the mouse like this, but to use the shortcuts. For example, here you can see I'm using comma and semicolon. It's really the shortcuts that I want you to be able to find by hovering here. It'll give you the shortcuts. Normally, it's comma and period. Personally, I added semicolon because it was closer on my keyboard. You can change it in the keyboard shortcuts. So you search Advance per frame, you click and press on keyboard key that you want. I added the semicolon. It's just, for me, the easier way to advance. That means I'm going to work with a tablet and not my mouse. Don't be afraid, I'm using the cheapest tablet on the market, but still it has a good quality. Wacom Bamboo at €60. You can go to their website. I also had a Cintiq 13 HD, but the idea is to make this tutorial reachable. So we'll do that with the Bamboo. Now for the demo, hop to the new keyframe. I take the B tool, brush, I can change the size, and here we can start to make our first ball. I advance to the new keyframe. Here the problem is that I'd like to see my previous keyframe. Here we'll have the tool Onion Peel. It's going to allow us to show all the frames behind it. New keyframe. Here we can see something starting to happen, and to resume I use F7 to create a new keyframe. If we want to extend the existing frame, we hit F5. Or just double-click and ask to delete the frames. Then we'll create 2 new layers. Tidy it in folders if necessary. Now there's nothing more, so we'll start. We'll be able to import what we generated in After Effects. The first composition. To analyze and work our direction, this frame, I make it last 100 frames to have a base. On a new layer, as you can see, I'm starting to put some lines. These new lines are here to work the velocity. Now my movements are going to operate in the duration I'm creating on a new layer, a test of these little lines. As you can see, the space between will be very important. I'm going to ask you to refer to the animation theories to know everything about timing. Here you saw how the frames are placed. Here I'm doing a little test with a small ball to analyze our first location of velocity lines. Here we can see there's a lot of slowdowns because there are a lot of lines that are getting closer in turns. I made a lot of slowdowns in almost every corner. So I delete it in the middle, and let's see what that gives us. We can see the ball accelerate in the middle. And it slows down in the other turns. That's not what I want. I want the opposite. I want to accelerate the ball, but I need to slow it down in the middle. So I brought the velocity lines closer into the middle. Now I advise you before starting to make animation, details, and drops, to have at least a perspective on your velocities. When I made and tested this first direction, I can make exactly the same for the second direction. Hop. So here I see that it matches. We're almost good. We'll test it more and you'll do more of these exercises, and you'll be better able to visualize by drawing these lines how it will react. I encourage you to practice it a lot. Here I'm putting my little spirals in. And now we'll start. As you can see, I'm creating a new layer A. We said we'll call our 2 directions A and B. So we'll make a first base of animation thanks to my landmarks. The idea is to go little by little. Don't go too fast to have a render. So here, what I'm starting to do is a rough drop. With dynamism. A kind of general form. And I'm trying to respect my velocities. I have a direction and also landmarks on my frames now. I know when and how the form has to deform. Here, you saw for a first try, there's almost 2 hours since the beginning. But at least we're advancing together, and that allows me to already have a base. I can make the same way to the drop B. Here I'm trying to follow and match. Faster it goes, more it will extend, more it will slow down, more it compresses. You have to play with the dynamic. It's really like a feeling that I need to ask you to have. I'm going to make a little parentheses because, as you can see, we just had a first base. This parentheses because this first step will ask you to call to your inspirations, knowledges, what we like. Here, for example, I advise you to go on Dribbble and follow some artists. Break down their works. For example, Henrique Barone is really famous for his qualities. Mantis also makes fabulous things. Animade, Edward Mikolov. Here, for example, I'm on one of the buckets of Tim Konstantinov, who made a subject around liquids. I encourage you to analyze and understand, record GIFs, decompose it frame per frame. Make some trials, because we want something where you need to focus on your feelings. I'm not going to teach you step by step how to make a liquid effect, because it's really about analysis. Alright, let's begin. When I think of having the base of my directions, I'll be able to make here the body and the form, the details. The idea is to create something liquid at the beginning. It's often deformed. You always need to follow the dynamic. Evaluate how it can react. Physically, if there's a gravity effect. According to the speed of movement. Some drops are more or less heavy. Some directions will come off little by little. Become smaller and smaller. The idea is to make protract some drops by many frames. But at this moment, we'll have a lot of liquid on the screen everywhere, so we need to make some disappear. Yeah, you saw that I'm allowing myself to make a glossy effect, just at the head of the ball with the eraser. I only make 2 little lines, and that makes a spectacular effect. It costs nothing, and that gives it a lot. As you can see, the idea is to analyze. Here, we have the impression that I go fast, but it's almost an hour ago. I'll try to speed up to make the video easier. It's time to learn that you always have to analyze the slightest drop. You saw we had the impression that it's jumping when I'm accelerating just because I move forward and back. So here we see when I did, for example, my first drop, my first shifting, the idea is to rework on it and to create some secondary animations. For example, in a turn, there's a drop which doesn't follow the main direction, which is going to leave separately, a little bit like the spirals I made at the beginning. And I can add some details. We can see the drop that escapes just here, because it's an interesting effect. We can do it again in another turn. Try to test it. It's not that complicated. Something good is that kind of fluid, and you're not required to be a professional artist. I'm absolutely not. The work is a feeling, an analysis. Here, the same thing. I start with the second ball. We'll try to slow down more steps to understand things. You saw I extended my little drops, my little forms. I tried to make it come off to make it leave in a spiral. The drop goes up because it takes a lot of speed. So I extend a lot of these elements. I try to deform the head to have something not really linear. It has to come off. So I also use the eraser to cut it. If sometime I have some drops that I don't like, I take my tool selection, I select, I delete, and I make a new one. And here I try to take the curves every time. Here I make a first analysis. The idea is to follow it and keep the dynamic, because it can happen that it doesn't work at all. So I remake it right now. Don't be in a hurry. Something obvious is that you don't have to have a fast render. I think it took me 6 hours and I took my time. Try to analyze things. As you saw, I took the curve and I tried to get the drops off. By keeping the main body, I take the eraser. I try to make the spectacular effect at the head. Every time at the back, every piece that I get off, it has to be drops which decrease and disappear. Analyze constantly. You can see it's flashing, because I'm accelerating the frame that I'm looking at before and after, etc. I'm playing a lot with those shortcuts comma and semicolon. Last turn. Obviously, the more I make it, the more I can make drops and forms that I like more than my first direction in blue. I know that my red direction, I appreciate much more my last turns and some forms. Everything comes with training. I'm still far along in making something interesting. But what's sure is that we already have interest, frame per frame without having character of anything else. I'm finishing some little drops like this in turns, and it's adding some details to have these kinds of specifics. It's detached the eye that makes the animation fluid. Here, last step. I put the exit of drops from the ball on a new layer. I take directly the color with the palette tool, and I put it to try to make some waves which are leaving and crashing. I don't take many frames. As you can see, I made it without recording, despite me because I didn't record it. But it was exactly the same process. Here I just need to select the visibility. I can hide the visibility layer, and I export at PNG all the animation of my first direction. Here you can see the PNG is transparent. It's pretty fine to take it like this, and I'll do exactly the same for this sequence. I select this spiral and all the red sequence, and I export it. Same thing for the ball reactions. Now I've got everything, and we'll be able to make it on After Effects. Welcome back to After Effects. The first thing we'll do is import our sequences. Go to the folder, I check the PNG sequence, I bring in all the frames. By default, After Effects will make a timecode. Here, right-click on the footage. You can adjust it at 15 frames per second, which was the number of frames in Animate. I import all my sequences at 15 frames per second. Here, I can drag it in my composition, and I see that everything's all right. I changed my 12 frames per second composition to 15 now, because I updated it in Animate. Everything's working. I just accelerate one step, where I put my first colors, which won't be the final colors. What we're going to start now is to compose some elements. Here, as you can see, for example, some elements are overlapping and not behind or in front of it. I cut here the beginning of my drop, and I put it back on my ball, so my form layer. Here, the same thing. We're going to analyze, and we've got some elements that go in front of the ball instead of being inside of it. So I cut it and put it behind the ball. What I'm doing here is to analyze where the elements are too placed in front of the ball. Here, I can create a mask instead of cutting. This mask, I'm going to ask to delete all the elements inside of it. Then I make keyframes on this mask to adjust the time of the action of it. I'm moving forward frame per frame and creating new keyframes. When the mask is useless, I make it leave my composition. That allows me to delimit my elements which go beyond the ball. The idea then the first time is to manage my frame sequence, to cut and work it, which are the foreground or background. It's not complicated. You just need to separate the elements and rearrange them in the right order, from the beginning into the end. Then we can also arrange the color of the timeline. The idea is to be well organized. Keep analyzing what gene, and here we can see it's overlapping again. Keep working. I cut. I place it at the right place and at the right time. That was the first thing. It seems to be complicated, but it's not. We're just tidying up our sequences. The thing is that we didn't do it in Animate, so we're taking the time to do it in After Effects. I'll be focused on the splash created when the drops come to the ball. Now, you saw that I didn't make the splash under the ball. I thought I was going to save time by duplicating the splash at the top. I duplicated it and oriented it. To finish, I'm going to use Disassociate and make a horizontal mirror by putting -100. It saves me time. Here, for example, we've got two splashes. The idea is to start the balls at a different time. I'm going to disassociate the splash, which is on the same sequence. We've got 4 splashes, 2 for the entrance and the exit of every direction. What I'll do is I'll apply every splash for the direction of A and B for entrance and exit. I'm organizing everything. I'm changing colors, I'm replacing it. I'm also putting the elements in the right order, to be at the foreground or at the background. I make the in and out for the both contacts with the ball. Here, it's well organized, and we'll be able to duplicate all of it for direction B. Before duplicating it, I'll try to shift it. By shifting it, we can have 2 directions which won't start at the same time, and that's the reason why it's interesting. We organized all of our compositions to be able to manage all these elements. I can see quickly that everything for direction B is red and yellow for A. Here, for example, I select the A direction. I duplicate it and I change the place, only shifting. I'm trying to get my direction into my ball and to make it leave by the other side. It crosses into the ball. That's what we need to imagine. It's timing work. When I look at it, we can see the direction it takes in the ball. Perhaps 1 or 2 frames. I move back 2 frames to see. Maybe it's too fast. So I move forward 1 frame now. We can feel it crosses the ball. We'll repeat the animation and create a loop. Same thing, I duplicate the second direction for B. I put in the right timing. And here it's all right. What I can do, even if it's not necessary, is to make my composition into a new one to manage the loop. When I make it, here for example, I'm going to place it in the middle. I put it at the beginning of the composition, and I delete the beginning. I try to find the same time and make a loop. I think I found it. I can make a picture here by using this tool. When I go to my first frame, it was placed exactly on the right position. I just need to move back 1 frame to avoid having the same frame twice when it's looping. And now we've found the loop. Because I'm on a new composition, we could make it in the same, but don't worry about that. A tip to find the landmark is don't touch my temporary code. Put a landmark on my composition and not on my layers. Here I go to the beginning of the composition of the loop. And here our temporary code moves automatically. I just need to put in my 2 landmarks. Retag it as entrance and exit, so loop in and loop out. And now I can preview my loop. We've got a clear loop. And all the elements are well placed. There are no faults. Everything is in the right place. I've just chosen the colors. I didn't record the research. I just chose a color gradient of 2 colors. I think it's a pretty harmony. I wanted a light background to be better on Dribbble. And what I need to finish now is to add some shadows. When the direction goes in front of the ball, I'm using the ball by duplicating it. I'm duplicating the sequence of A. When it goes in front of it, the idea is to make an alpha on the ball. Because when I put it in solo, you'll see we'll only have this render in the ball. This render is very easy and move it into position. I choose a little color of shadow because why not? I don't think it's going to be very useful. I just need an inlay. It'll be better. You saw there's a shadow created, which is only visible on the ball thanks to the alpha. I just need to place it at a good place so you can see in purple in the timeline. Now I'm going to make the same thing for B direction. I put it in alpha, I duplicate it here twice or more, like 3 times, to intensify the inlay fusion mode. Here we've got shadows created, we've got our animation made on Animate and Flash previously, and as you can see, we need to be more organized to make it frame per frame. Alright, we just finished the composition in After Effects, so we'll end here. I think you need to keep practicing to improve. There's so much to do. Thank you again to our partner, AE Juice, who made the translation possible. Check out their Liquid Elements pack, which will save you weeks or even months of work. More than 1,000 frame-by-frame animations, including similar to ones we worked on today. You can also download the free starter pack with over 100 animations and give it a try. The links are in the description. All links are affiliated, so you're helping Motion Cafe's community to produce more tutorials by purchasing products from AE Juice. Thank you for your support. By the way, don't hesitate to like this video and post a comment. And if you want other tutorials on traditional animation, well, that's pretty fun, but it's long to do. Be inspired. The video of Edward is on the link below to complete this subject. Don't hesitate to join Motion Cafe and follow us. There will be a new tutorial. Shows will start again. So don't hesitate to join our Facebook group, the forum. It's a French community. Alright, that's it. Thanks for watching.